In a crowded room, you stand quietly, watching the swirl of laughter and motion. Everyone seems to belong to the rhythm. The jokes, the gestures, the endless exchange of small reassurances. And yet, behind every smile, you catch something else. A flicker of exhaustion, a trace of fear. You feel like static under the noise. It isn't cynicism that keeps you silent. It's vision. The more you understand, the harder it becomes to pretend. You begin to see through the fabric that holds ordinary life together. The polite fictions, the half-truths, the convenient amnesia that keeps people comfortable. You notice how meaning is stitched together from repetition. Rituals that pass a connection. Ambitions that disguise emptiness. Arguments repeated like hymns to avoid the quiet between them. Intelligence, real intelligence, is not about calculation. It is about sensitivity. It's the ability to perceive what others edit out. You sense the tremor in a voice before it breaks. The lie hiding behind good intentions. The silent agreement that we will not speak of what hurts. And once you see these things, you can't go back to blindness. Clarity is irreversible, but clarity is also heavy. Every contradiction you notice adds a stone to the pocket of your soul. You start to envy the ones who can still believe, who can lose themselves in gossip politics, success stories. You wish you could, just for a day, stop seeing the cracks. Because awareness doesn't always feel like light. Sometimes it feels like standing beneath a truth too large for the human heart to carry. So you smile when you're supposed to. You listen while others talk in circles. But inside, you're translating everything into something more honest. You're hearing the loneliness behind their laughter, the longing behind their pride, and you realize that understanding people doesn't always make you closer to them. Sometimes it makes you feel like a ghost moving among the living. It isn't superiority. It's the simple tragedy of perception. To see clearly is to stand apart. Your mind becomes a window no one else looks through, a lens too clean for the dust of ordinary dreams. And that distance, that silent awareness, becomes the first price you pay for clarity. This is how isolation begins. Not as rejection, not as choice, but as the quiet consequence of seeing too much. The crowd keeps dancing. The music goes on, and you remain, half in their world, half outside it, watching, understanding, and carrying the gentle weight of seeing everything just a little too clearly. You begin to see the pattern in every conversation, the way people circle the same words, the same rehearsed emotions. Every gathering feels like a scene from a play that's been running so long no one remembers the script. They just keep performing because silence would break the illusion. You notice how politeness is often a form of avoidance, how smiles become shields, how apologies are spoken not to heal, but to reset the game. And you watch as ambition masquerades as passion, when underneath it is mostly fear. Fear of being ordinary, fear of being unseen, fear of facing the emptiness that waits when the noise stops. The intelligent mind is cursed with pattern recognition. You can't help but see the threads. You see how compliments are currency, how outrage is entertainment, how people exchange opinions like souvenirs from places they've never actually been. It's not malice, it's habit. A world addicted to repetition cannot bear the weight of genuine thought. You start to realize that society runs not on truth, but on a shared agreement to keep the truth hidden, a beautiful conspiracy of distraction. The game thrives on selective blindness. Don't look too closely, don't question the ritual, and everything will keep working. But once you see the machinery, once you hear the gears grinding beneath the melody, you can't dance to its music anymore. You watch people chase status, approval, attention. Each one convinced they're choosing freely, not realizing the strings were tied long before they were born. The advertisements that sell dreams, the systems that define success, the quiet pressure to stay inside the story. It's everywhere in one scene. It's impossible to unsee. So you withdraw a little, not out of contempt, but exhaustion. You grow tired of pretending that the play is real, that the applause matters, that the costume still fits. You try to speak honestly, but honesty makes people uncomfortable. They think you're cynical when you're simply awake. There's a certain sadness that comes with clarity. You don't judge the actors anymore. You understand why they perform. The play keeps them safe. The illusion gives them meaning. And you realize, perhaps painfully, that not everyone wants freedom. Most people only want comfort, and comfort is cheaper than truth. So you sit in the audience now, quietly watching the stage, knowing the lines, knowing the cues, and feeling the distance widen between you and the world. Because once you see the machine, you can't dance to its music anymore. The room is alive with laughter, chatter, the sound of easy smiles. And yet, somewhere in the middle, you stand silent. The words pass over you like water, but you catch the currents beneath, the tension in someone's glance, the sadness in another's smile, the quiet desperation hiding behind polite nods. You begin to realize that most people fear depth. They prefer noise, distraction, repetition, anything that allows them to avoid the tremor beneath the surface. And here you are, fluent in what they cannot face, feeling what they refuse to acknowledge. Intelligence is not arrogance. It is empathy, a deep, unrelenting, sometimes unbearable empathy. You cannot turn it off. You cannot unfeel the cracks in people's armor. You witness the small betrayals that pass for kindness. You see the lies that hold lives together. You sense the unspoken grief in every conversation. And once you see these things, you carry them, not because you want to, but because awareness cannot lie dormant. And so comes the loneliness, not the hollow loneliness of being ignored, but the quiet exile of knowing too much. Others continue to perform their roles. You see the stage, the actors, the invisible strings, and you cannot join in without betraying your own clarity. It is not superiority that isolates you. It is the way to perception. You feel too deeply in a world that fears feeling. Your laughter, when it comes, tastes different because you know the price paid for its ease. And your silence hums with understanding, a quiet hum that the shallow cannot hear. If you've ever felt this quiet distance, tell me below. Your story might remind someone else they're not the only one still feeling deeply. There's a beauty in this pain. The same depth that makes you a stranger also allows you to touch truths others cannot see. You learn to sit with sorrow without claiming it, to watch the world without judging, to understand the loneliness without resenting it. And yet it aches, because you belong nowhere fully, neither in the crowd nor in complete solitude. You are awake in a world still dreaming, and that awakening comes with a quiet, persistent cost. You are too alive, too aware, too human for their comfort, and the world, in turn, is too asleep to see you. You try to live honestly in a system built on pretending. You speak the truth, quietly, carefully, but the world seems to have no room for it. Every gesture of authenticity meets resistance. Every honest thought is weighed against convenience. Every act of clarity is measured in fear. Intelligence, the very gift that allows you to perceive the unseen, often becomes your burden. Because the world does not reward clarity. It rewards comfort, conformity, the illusion of competence. It applauds the actor who plays the role well, not the one who notices that the role itself is meaningless. The marketplace, the offices, the gatherings, they are not designed for vision. They are designed for participation. And you begin to feel the friction. The mind that asks questions, that probes, that sees beneath the surface, is treated as a problem. The ideals you carry, honesty, integrity, discernment, clash with the systems built to reward expedience, not truth. Every effort to navigate them with care feels like walking on a thin wire above a pit of misunderstanding. You notice how compromise erodes not just comfort, but identity. You can participate, yes, but at a cost. Every lie you avoid, every mask you refuse to wear, becomes a wedge separating you from the crowd. You are not weak, you are awake. But the culture was never made for the awakened, and this is a subtle tragedy. Intelligence, the tool for understanding, can become self-sabotage in a world that thrives on selective blindness. Every moral choice, every refusal to pretend, is another stone added to the wall that separates you from ordinary life. You try to blend in, but the eye that sees cannot unsee. You try to conform, but the heart that knows cannot unfeel. At times, it feels lonely, even exhausting. You wonder if others are blind by necessity or by choice. And you realize that awareness itself is often punished, not with malice, but with indifference. The world continues, spinning in its comfortable patterns, and the weight of seeing too much rests on your shoulders alone. Yet there is a quiet lesson in this friction. The mind built for truth will never feel at ease in a culture built on illusion. And that is not failure, it is survival. Because ease is temporary, borrowed from the dreams of the unawake. But clarity, though heavy, is real. And the one who carries it quietly moves through life with a patience and perspective the world cannot give, watching discerning, and choosing presence over pretense. So you continue not to change the world, but to remain honest to yourself, even if the applause never comes, even if the crowd misunderstands, even if the system rewards everything but insight. You understand at last that your loyalty must be to truth, because it is the only place where you can finally feel at home. You walk away from the noise, the chatter, the rehearsed smiles, the endless hum of people performing their roles. All of it fades behind you, and the quiet begins to settle like a soft tide. At first, it feels empty. The absence of others feels like punishment, like exile. You recall the crowded rooms, the conversations, the laughter, and you wonder if you've chosen the wrong path, if the world itself has rejected you for seeing too much. But as the hours stretch into days, and days into solitude, a subtle shift occurs. The silence is no longer a void. It becomes a space to breathe. The mind that once raced to keep pace with others now finds a rhythm it was always meant to know. The soul, pressed by the weight of understanding, begins to stretch, to expand in the quiet. Loneliness transforms into sanctuary. The same space that once felt empty now hums with presence. Not the presence of others, but the presence of yourself, fully awake and unedited, free from the expectations of a world that cannot see you. You learn to listen to your own thoughts without interference, to feel your own emotions without absorbing the noise around you, to measure your own depth without comparison. And in this space, intelligence finds a kind of peace. The gifts that once felt like burdens, awareness, perception, insight, begin to feel like tools for survival. You do not need the crowd to validate your understanding. You do not need approval to feel your own clarity. You are enough, simply by observing, breathing, and being present. The world outside continues its endless performance, but it no longer demands your participation. You watch it with gentle compassion, without needing to intervene, to explain, or to persuade. The distance that once felt like exile now feels protective, a shield that allows your mind and spirit to rest, to grow, to exist without friction. You realize that this withdrawal is not weakness. It is preservation. It is the cultivation of the inner garden, where thoughts can bloom without interruption, where truths can take root without being trampled by distraction, where insight can mature without compromise. And so intelligence learns a new rhythm. It moves gently through life, carrying clarity without tension, watching without judgment, listening without interference, and finally, feeling the quiet joy of belonging, not to a place, not a people, but to the depth of your own presence. Loneliness becomes sanctuary when you stop fighting it, and in this stillness, you learn to live gently with yourself. The city sleeps beneath a pale dawn, streets empty, lights fading, the world holding its breath before the day begins. You walk alone, yet not lonely, for in this quiet hour, you feel it, a sense of home not tied to bricks, not tied to faces, not tied to approval. You were never truly lost. The world may have seemed foreign, its rhythm alien, its values incongruous with your understanding. And yet, you realize now you were simply ahead of time, moving through a space the majority cannot yet perceive. To belong here would have required compromise, and compromise would have dimmed the very light that guides you. Awakening carries its own sense of exile. Those who see clearly often drift on the edges of life, watching, learning, observing, but not fully participating in the masquerade of comfort and pretense. And as the sun rises, painting the sky in muted gold, you see that this distance is not punishment. It is protection. It is the space that allows consciousness to flourish, unshaken by illusions it once needed to survive. The realization dawns slowly. Home is not a place, and belonging is not measured by acceptance. You belong to awareness itself, to the ability to witness without judgment, to feel without being consumed, to move without losing presence. The crowd may never understand, but that no longer matters. The outsider is never an exile, they are an early witness, a sentinel of clarity, quietly inhabiting the world without being consumed by it. And so, you walk through the waking streets, listening to the first birds, the faint stirrings of life, feeling neither superior nor apart, simply present. You watch people chase illusions, repeat rituals, and you love them not by changing them, but by seeing them fully as they are. You understand that trying to mold the world to match your vision would only diminish your own presence. And so you release it, letting clarity exist untouched by expectation. There's a luminous peace in this understanding. It is quiet, subtle, yet profoundly deep. You no longer chase belonging in the conventional sense. You no longer measure life by conformity or applause. The sense of home comes from within, from the alignment of perception and presence, from the harmony between seeing clearly and loving fully. And finally, you smile at the horizon, aware that you were never meant to fit the world. You were meant to see it clearly and love it from the outside.